Hello, hello. Welcome to the August Creative and Productive Q&A. So, let's get right to it. We've got about 30 minutes. If you have a question, don't hesitate to post it in the comments and I'll try to answer them. In the meantime, while you get warmed up, I'll go through some questions that I received in the past few weeks. Okay, so first question I got was about so it's from Rick, and he had a couple of albums that he had released, and he was about to release a third. And his question, he didn't have the stems, and he didn't have instrumental versions or stems for the first two albums. So his question was, would you say for those first two albums it would be largely a waste of time trying to license the tracks? So he only has the vocal versions of the songs. So with sync licensing, it is way better if you can provide instrumental versions and alternative mixes and stem files of your tracks. So I do think it would be largely a waste of time to try to find sync placements for those sound recordings. That doesn't mean you shouldn't give it a try. You can always, send them to a bunch of music libraries and see what happens. It is probable that the music libraries will ask you for instrumental versions and won't be interested if you can't provide them. So, yeah, that's unfortunately, obviously be careful for that third album. But unfortunately, the first two albums you probably can't do much about. In terms of sync licensing. Although you can still get in touch with a music publisher, they may be interested in the composition. You never know. All right, so second question was, is it worthwhile trying to hit up music supervisors through LinkedIn? So I would say that that's a question from Daniel or Danielle. I never know how to pronounce it. Danielle in French. Yeah. So I'd say it's worth a try if you do your research and approach them respectfully. But I'd also make sure I have other strategies at the same time. It's notoriously hard to grab a music supervisor's attention, especially if you don't have any experience and you don't have a referral from someone else, simply because they're super busy and overwhelmed with unsolicited music submissions. So you want to put a few other strategies in place if your goal is to get music on TV shows. So first thing is I would say, try to build relationships with music supervisors that are open and active on Twitter, like Rob Lowry, so Lowri. You never know. There might be a submission opportunity down the line. It never hurts, and you'll get a bunch of helpful insights from their Twitter feed. Also, reaching out to people who are less in demand, but around that music supervisor circle. So, for example, composers on TV shows are fairly under the radar. You can find them through IMDb and try to get in touch with them and ask about their experience and kind of network your way through fellow composers who are more experienced. Maybe ask for offer to be an intern or something like that. And also, other members of the music crew listed on IMDb who are less in demand than the music supervisors themselves. Also, reaching out to up-and-coming indie artists who've had their music placed on a show to ask how they got that placements. For example, I did an interview with Justin Tessier from the Bluestones a couple years ago, and he told me how they got their sync deals. They got a few really lucrative sync deals, even though they were focused on gigs, but because they were playing live, they got contacts that way. Anyway, reaching out to indie bands who are getting placed in your favorite TV shows and asking them how they got placed can be really insightful. And also, finding out and reaching out to the publishers and sync companies that supervisors work with. So usually music supervisors will have a couple that they really trust and work with. So finding that information again by maybe following them on Twitter, or if they have a blog, that can be more worthwhile than hitting them up directly through LinkedIn. All right. Another question I got was about, should I hold back licensing my stronger material, or does it not really make a huge difference? That was a question from PJ, and my answer is simply don't worry too much about what your stronger material is. So you just never know. I've seen this many times where someone thinks they send over what they think is their strongest material, and it turns out it doesn't it doesn't appeal to anyone. And on the contrary, a song that they kind of thought, okay, I guess I'll submit it, but didn't really think much about, then that's the one that gets picked. So it's really, really difficult to know what your strongest material is and if that even means anything. So I would say don't worry too much about what's your strongest or weaker material. If it's broadcast quality, if it's well produced, send it over. And if you're not sure if it's well produced enough, just stuff it in the middle of a playlist of of broadcast quality tracks. So maybe stick it in the middle of a Spotify playlist. And if it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb, it means it's broadcast quality. If it does stick out, something's probably wrong with the mix. Okay. Which brings me nicely to another question I got, which is how can I master my songs for an affordable price? So I personally use the Ozone plugin from Isotope. It's a little bit expensive. They do have usually have a good sale around Good Friday, so you may want to get it on Good Friday in a few months. Otherwise, you've got online services like Landr, Landr. That's an automated online mastering service, and I'll actually link to a video that a reader sent me that's really good about comparing online services like Landr and Ozone and having your track mastered by a real mastering engineer. It's really interesting because so I'll put the link in the show notes after the call. But my preferred option is learning how to use Ozone, and if you can afford it, get in the studio with a real mastering engineer who can maybe teach you a thing or two and help you make your mixes better. So yeah. Landr is affordable as well and does a decent job if you're just getting started. Okay. Hey, Tony. Good to have you on board. Okay, I actually, before I go through a few other questions, I also want to do an update on copyright registration with the U.S. Copyright Office. So there's a bit of a confusion since March. They released there's a different process to register a group of unpublished works. So I've updated the post about how to copyright your music on creativeandproductive.com. So I'll share the link in the show notes as well. But just so you know, there are not two different ways that you can register a group of songs. There's through a standard application. If you're registering a group of songs that have been published, and the definition of published is a little tricky on the U.S. Copyright Office's website. But if you have it distributed through Spotify or it's published, basically. So you've got that method of registering your copyrights for a group of published works. And now you've got a special application to register a group of unpublished works. So if you haven't distributed your songs yet and you haven't, and you want to register an album that's not been published yet, you'll need to go through the group registration of unpublished works, and there's um, a special application form for that, a special form for that. Sorry. So I'll post the link in the video description after this, and so you can make sure you're all set. All right. Hey Jackson, Tony, if you have questions, don't hesitate to post them. I'll just go through a couple of other questions I got in advance, and then answer your questions or close this Q&A. All right. So another question I got is, if I'm focused on licensing, do I really need to release my sound recordings? So that kind of goes back to a question I get fairly often, which is having my music on Spotify compatible with licensing? And is it necessary for licensing? So the answer is, you can have your music on Spotify if you want to. It is compatible with licensing. So, for example, I was talking about the Bluestones earlier. They were playing live. They had their music on Spotify, and they got songs, licensed on TV shows like Suits and Monday Night Football. So it is absolutely compatible with licensing. However, you don't have to have your music on Spotify if you don't want to. So, if you're not playing live, if you're not trying to get your music on Spotify playlists, if you're not really interested in getting radio plays or building a fan base around your music that's available publicly, you don't really need to release your sound recordings. So you can, but you don't have to. All right. Now, last question was about stem files. So that was through my course, Get Your Music Licensed, and I got a couple questions regarding stem files that I thought were really interesting, so I'll share them today. I'll share my answers today. So the first question was around mixing. So a stem file, and in the context of music licensing, stem files is when you produce the stem files, when you bounce out the stem files. It means, for example, you're bouncing out all your drum tracks into one file, and then separately you have your bass, and then separately maybe you have your strings. So those are the stem files. And the question I got, when you bounce out those stem files, each track individually sounds kind of weird because it's outside the full mix. So you've fully mixed your track, and you've mastered it even, but you've fully mixed your track, and now you're taking out one part at a time. So each part and individual part sounds weird. So the first question was like, do I need to kind of remix those individual stem files, or am I okay to send the stem files as they are through to the client, since they're going to be reassembling the track anyway? So my answer to that is, you can, if you want to, remix some of those stems to provide an alternative mix, because you think that one instrument can sound great on its own. For example, maybe you have a really cool, drum section, and you can make an alternative version with only the drums. But that's an alt mix. It's not really a stem. So you absolutely do not have to mix your stems again. You just bounce them and you send them as they are. As Tommy said in his question, really, the client is going to reassemble them anyway. All right, the second question around stem files was, okay, so my track is 3 minutes long, and sometimes, some sections don't play the full 3 minutes. Actually, most sections don't play the full 3 minutes. So should the stem for an instrument that comes in part way through the song be cropped so that, or should it be the full 3 minutes with 1 minute silence to start with. And my answer to that is the stems should be the full track, so they should include the silence. It's really the same as for the other question, really. If there is a really strong bass line in one part of the arrangement, that you might want to isolate it and turn it into an alt mix, or provide a short bass cue. You can absolutely do that. But when you're sending over the stem files, when your client asks for a stem file, you provide the full length of the track for each instrument, even if the instrument only plays for 1 minute of the song. All right, so that was really like the questions I got this month that I thought were worth sharing with you. So now you've got Tony asking, if a piece is exclusive to a library, does that change releasing through a distributor? Okay, great question. And actually, it doesn't, unless your exclusive deal says specifically that you're handing over copyrights. So in that case, you're giving copyrights, for example, of the sound recording. Then if you're transferring your sound recording copyrights and your composition copyrights over to the library, then in theory, the library, only the library has the right to decide when to copy the tracks or not. But most music libraries, even exclusive libraries, the exclusivity is on the fact that they're exclusive. You're giving them the exclusive right to place your tracks on TV shows and YouTube or whatever. You're giving them the exclusive right to license one of your tracks. You're not, that is a separate issue. That is a different issue from distributing your music, which is for private use on Spotify and such. All right. If there are no other questions, I leave it at that for today, and I'll see you in September. I actually haven't decided yet when I'll have this live Q&A in September. So, I'll just post this and on creativeandproductive.com and have a link for next time. All right. Talk to you soon. Bye.